What's going on, Bottom Line viewers? It's Mitch here, joined by Adam, AC, and Dilly Vanilli. We're back for another Final Four March Madness preview and predictions. It is the Final Four. We have four very compelling teams and a couple different type of matchups, for March Madness. Usually a couple of these teams rather choke before this point. They don't get to this point. They're kind of smaller schools. There's a lot of underdogs here, minus about one school, and that's about it. And we'll get into the matchups. We'll preview them both. We'll give you our predictions. Whether there will be an upset, we'll see. And we'll just have fun talking about some college basketball. Because, again, to remind you guys before we do these, we are more casual fans than anything. There are some diehard NCAA basketball fans. We just are kind of March Madness guys. We watch the March Madness. We get into it. We do our brackets. We talk about the games, and we're basketball fans, so we can analyze the basketball part of it. We're not great with the names and stuff, but we can get into it. Hope you guys enjoy this. If you do, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more previews and recaps of the NCAA tournament. So, guys, what's your thoughts initially on the Final Four and the teams that are in it?
Adam, go first because you haven't been on any of these before.
Yeah, you know what? It's been a weird tournament in general. Not as much hype I've seen in past tournaments, maybe because the upsets have been not close games. You know what I mean? There's just been a lot of thrashings in key games, like take the Elite Eight, for instance. If you're looking at that, the UNC-Kentucky game was a wild finish. But other than that, South Carolina – great story. I really liking how they're playing. They beat Florida by 7. Gonzaga cleans up in their game. And then Oregon beats Kansas by like 15. But as a Vancouver, Canada guy, it's great to see Gonzaga in, and it's great to see Oregon in. Following the tournament for the last, 15 years, we've seen Gonzaga have those great players, the Adam Morrisons, the Rob Sacras, Kelly Olynyk, great teams. Just they never can get past like the Sweet 16. So it's great to see them finally make a push. I always have a hard time picking the Zags, but this was finally the season where everyone who picked them are finally getting a pat on the back for that. And then, yeah, I know because it was one
including
of the years,
me, man. I picked them to win the tournament. I still got them.
I know, and I told you I was just like I really like them. I just never can pick them because they're always good for a screw up, a Sweet 16 loss. And then Oregon, the last 3 years, I've really liked them, and they're always good for a choke show the last couple of years. So it's nice to see Oregon there. I really like how UNC's playing compared to those other big schools like Duke, Kentucky, Kansas that always bring in a lot of true one-and-done players. UNC the last couple of years have kind of created a nice base with Barry and Jackson. So I'm liking that. But all 4 games are going to be good, and I'm going to be watching. But I hope there's a little more excitement factor than we've seen, because in the past we've seen these Cinderella teams like South Carolina get all the way to the Final Four and then get beat up in the Final Four to make it less exciting. So I'm just hoping that both these games come right down to the end.
Yeah, these are really interesting games we're going to talk about. 2 of these teams had never made it to the Final Four, and one hasn't made it since the very first year this tournament was made. So it's kind of interesting. We're getting some new teams in the mix. UNC, they've been there quite a bit, but just the combination of these 4 teams is really interesting. South Carolina, they played really good basketball. They played some of the better teams in the country, 2-seed Duke, 3-seed Baylor. They beat a 4-seed Florida to get in the Final Four. Gonzaga, like Adam brought up, they've always been known to kind of crush down under the pressure. And now that they got to the Final Four, they're going to face maybe perhaps an easier challenge than they were going to before, but it's still going to be an interesting matchup. Oregon, I really did think they were going to choke. I thought they were going to lose in the Sweet 16 against Michigan, and they won by 1 point. So I was very close on that. But they've been kind of more dominant. They just beat what I considered the best team left in the tournament in the Elite Eight versus Kansas. And you got UNC, who's had some pretty good basketball and played one of the best games of the tournament so far against Kentucky the other night. So that was an interesting mix of all 4 teams here. And I think Saturday is going to be a good day to watch basketball. Unfortunately, two of us won't be able to as much, but it will still be a lot of fun to see what's going on there. And I think we're ready for some pretty interesting games come Saturday.
Yes, sir. So let's start off with the first matchup. South Carolina takes on Gonzaga. I think we know where we're rooting, at least two of us. I think myself, AC, we're both on Gonzaga because they're a West Coast team. We're rooting for the West Coast because we're both here in Vancouver. So that's just a bias, just straight off the top. There you go. But I do want to say something. I've been really impressed on how South Carolina has played this tournament. They've been really good, and they've been really exciting to watch. That one game against Duke totally blew me like out of the water. I was like, what the heck just happened? They blew Duke right out. Thornwell like took it over, and he's taken the entire tournament over. He's arguably been the best player every game he's played. He's, I think, averaging the most points in the tournament. Then you have their fans that were like nuts over that Duke game, which I just thought that would carry some momentum, and it has. You know, you saw them win last round, which was shocking. I mean, it's just crazy. And if you look at the teams these two teams have played and they've beaten, I mean, South Carolina has arguably beaten some better teams. You look at Marquette, Duke, Baylor, Florida. When you look at Gonzaga, because they're the higher seed, they've gotten the easier teams. You know, they've gotten the Northwesterns, the West Virginias, the Xaviers, some teams that were kind of, you know, underdog, Cinderella teams like a South Carolina, and they've been able to hold on and beat them. But South Carolina has beaten the best of the best in this tournament. So it's very interesting going into this. I'm going to go with Gonzaga just because I think inside they can dominate the post. I don't think they've really done a great job of that, but I think that's going to be the ultimate X factor of the game. They have those big guys inside, and I think they'll be able to dominate the post both on the boards and offensively, which I think that's their number one game plan. That's when their offense is at their best. They get it to those big guys, and they get to the hoop. South Carolina, they like to play with speed. They like to play transition, and they like to get the ball to their stud. I think it's going to be a very interesting game. It could go down to the wire, but I'm going to take Gonzaga in this one. What do you guys think?
This is really going to be an interesting game to watch. We see more of the scrappy team and South Carolina trying to fight their way to the top, and now they're here at the Final Four. Gonzaga really does play a team game. I'm not saying South Carolina doesn't, but they really know how to maximize every player to their strengths. And, Nigel Williams-Goss, he just continues to shoot very well for Gonzaga. That is pretty shocking, the teams that Gonzaga has played versus the teams that South Carolina has played. So normally we would pick somebody that's played the better competition, but I am going to also go with Gonzaga on this one. I still expect this to be a close game. I expect this to be a really good game. But at the end of the day, I kind of trust more of what Gonzaga is going to do on a defensive standpoint. I think Williams-Goss is going to be able to shoot and lead this team. There's some other key pieces. Jonathan Williams will come with some big rebounds. Of course, some of their other big men that have been there for the longest. And maybe this is a weird thing, but also experience could come into play because they have the oldest team out of these four groups left. That's been playing for, they're like 22 years of age. For a college team, that's a little bit longer than usual because some of these guys go one and done or out in 2 years. So I think Gonzaga's got more of the last year experience they want from seniors and juniors, and I think that's what's going to lead them to this victory. I'm not going more than 6 points. I still think it'll be very close, but I'm just going slightly for Gonzaga here.
Yeah, I'm going to be – I want Gonzaga to win, but I really hope if South Carolina does win, they've kind of taken North America by storm, starting with their coach, Frank Martin. Really likable. How many people knew of Frank Martin before now? He had some great sound bites, seems like a great leader, a guy that you kind of want to root for. If I'm looking just at the game, Mitch, you mentioned it, the front court, South Carolina does not have the size. And if you look at Gonzaga in this tournament, the big Polish guy, Kranowski, playing really well. Plus, Jonathan Williams was the most outstanding player. He's a big man. Obviously Nigel Doss is their leading points guy. They have athletic guards, but I think in the post, it's going to come down to that. And I think Gonzaga has the better matchup. But a couple stats that make me worry if you're a Gonzaga fan is the free throw percentage for Gonzaga in 4 games is 59%. They only make an average of 16 free throws a game so 16 free throws made, 28 attempted a game, and South Carolina's 75% free throw. So I think, in college basketball, we've seen it before. I've lost money on friggin' point spreads because of missed free throws. That's why I'm a big advocate for free throw shooting, because they're free points. And then looking at, I guess Thornwell's been really good, but he's going to be matched up with against some really athletic guards. Obviously, he's done it all season. He leads in the tournament. He leads South Carolina in minutes, points, rebounds, and steals. So he's going to have to put the team on his back. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be close. I'll take the points. If I'm a betting man, I'll take the points 6.5. I'll be rooting for the Zags, but I think South Carolina is going to make it close. And if you look at Gonzaga's toughest game was against West Virginia, where it's just all hard work and defense. I don't think South Carolina has that same pace in their defensive side, but they're still very strong. And that game, don't get me started on that possession against West Virginia, but I think that could be a factor. Both teams play good on defense. South Carolina has 30 steals in 4 games. Gonzaga has 24. Gonzaga has a lot more blocks, like we said, in the post, 23 blocks to South Carolina's 12. I think it's going to come down to in the post and free throws, but I'll take Zags, but I'll take Carolina in the points.
So I think just to add on to a couple things that Adam said, and just to add on to the storyline of the game, I think one thing that you said was the defense, and defense being that West Virginia had a pretty strong defense. But something that I've been impressed about Gonzaga is not necessarily their defense from like the whole game long for 60 minutes for, the whole game. The thing I've been impressed about with their defense is that those possessions that they really need to get a stop, they get the stop. And as we continue to go on, Final Four, if they make the final, this is going to be huge. They come up clutch when they need to defensively, and I think that's going to be big. And like you said, it's going to be an interesting matchup, what they do with Thornwell, because he's just been dominant. It doesn't matter who's guarding him. He's been dominant. He's scored. He's rebounded. He's stealing. So it doesn't really matter. They need to find somebody that can check him and take him one-on-one more often than not, or they're going to have to, send some double teams in the post when he gets inside. Like, it's going to be tough for Gonzaga to do that. And that's the X factor for me. If he can continue to take over and Gonzaga doesn't have an answer for him, it's going to be tough to see Gonzaga winning this game. But if they can control him and contain him for the most part, then I could see Gonzaga taking this game as well. And that's what I think will end up happening at the end of the day. Just to add on to the rest of the storyline of this game, isn't it incredible that both of these teams aren't usually teams that play in the Final Four? It's pretty crazy that these teams are in the Final Four to begin with.
Yeah. When you brought it, or when I brought up the fact that neither of these teams have played in the Final Four and they're going to match each other. Gonzaga had the most wins for before they got a Final Four. I think it was like 28, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it's a pretty crazy. It's pretty interesting to see both these teams have first Final Four appearances, and now one of them is going to be knocked out by the other.
Yeah, and Gonzaga is the first West Coast Conference team since San Francisco in 1957 to make it to the Final Four. Plus, under Mark Few, like we talked about, under Mark Few, they're 502 and 112. That's their record in 18 years. Just insane. So they dominated. It's going to see what they can do. And just to add on what Mitch said about Gonzaga's defense, we got to give their defense credit. We could talk about they maybe haven't played against the biggest beasts of the NCAA tournament, but still the lowest average points against with only 59, which is crazy low.
Yeah, it is. We have a few guys in the chat, including the one, the only Fitty Trent.
GOAT.
He said he's calling an all-Carolina final. We're going to get to North Carolina in just a sec. Andrew says, let's go South Carolina. Nice Patriots logo, by the way, on your picture. Fitty Trent says South Carolina 80, Gonzaga 77. Charles says Oakland Raiders 2017 Super Bowl champions. Noah says hi. What's going on, Noah? All right. So let's get on to the next game. We have nothing else to say about that one, at least for now. Let's get to Oregon versus North Carolina. Again, Carolina versus the West. This game, again, very interesting. And again, something I see about these two teams, 2 number 1 seeds in Gonzaga and North Carolina that don't really have necessarily players that take over games. Like, they have very good players and they have All-American players, but the guys on Oregon and the guys on South Carolina in terms of studs are just like a lot better when we look at both teams. And Oregon really impressed me. Usually Oregon is out of the tournament by now. Usually I'm not even an Oregon fan. I really don't even like Oregon that much. The only reason I would even cheer for them is because they're a West Coast team, but I'm not really a huge fan. But they've played really well, and they've impressed me every step of the way. Now, I had them advancing past Michigan, but when they played Kansas, I thought they were a goner. I thought Kansas looked great. I thought Kansas was going to steamroll them, but Oregon took it to Kansas. And I think something that was huge about Oregon, not only the studs on offense, like I mentioned, but their defense and their coaching on defense. The ability to switch what defense they were doing constantly to confuse what Kansas was trying to do on offense. Kansas could never get a rhythm offensively. They never looked comfortable. And I think Oregon, if they can do that same thing to North Carolina and keep their score low and play the way they want to play, which is small ball and get, shooting threes and stuff. And if they can hit those threes, then Oregon's going to be well on their way to the final. They're a good team. They have a few very good players. You might question some of their depth. They might not have the depth that North Carolina has on their bench and stuff, but they do have the studs and they do have the coaching defensively in order to get this upset. And I think that they will. I actually has just been really impressed. Maybe I'm overhyping Oregon now, but I think Oregon's just played really well. I think they're going to continue that confidence into this round in the Final Four and beat North Carolina. I think it's simple as that, guys.
Mitch, we do really seem to be on the same page a lot. It's weird lately. If you guys, the preview's coming up, but Oregon and North Carolina, I didn't really like Oregon up until the last game. I mean, I've been seeing what they were doing against teams like Rhode Island and Michigan, and I was like, it's not as dominant as I thought it was going to be. But then the Kansas game was there, and the defense was prominent. Kansas, sorry, that was my phone. Kansas was really good at scoring points. They had at least scored 90 points in each of their first 3 tournament games and not given up more than 70. So I was really, kind of expecting a dominant shooting affair from Kansas, but they only scored 60 points. So that goes to, defensive pressure, getting up on probably one of the better players in the league, Frank Mason. You got to stop him, and they were able to because he was a really poor shooter in that game. And at the end of the day, you got Dorsey, who was a key factor for them. He's one of those guys that kind of controls the offense for them, and he's going to be key, especially at the three-point line. That's what kind of got them their spark, and that's what they're going to need in this game. I'm also picking Oregon for the upset. North Carolina did play a really good game, one of the better, more fun games in the tournament against Kentucky. And again, like I said in the last game, if North Carolina was to win this game, I wouldn't be surprised at all, but we got to pick a winner and a loser. So I think Oregon, just especially in their last game, really impressed me with how they were going to put more defense into it and be more cohesive as a team further on. And, it's not always about how you start. It's about how you finish. And you got to finish against some of these better teams. So I'm going with Oregon over North Carolina, maybe by even a buzzer beater. It could be that close.
Yeah, like going what you said with the Kansas game, they shut down one of the best point guards in the NCAA tournament in Mason. I look at Barry, who I really like, who I think not in this tournament.
He is hurt though, right?
No,
he's playing. He's playing, but I think he's hurt.
He's playing hurt. Well, you got to bet on the guy then, though. But I like Barry just because the one thing that Oregon doesn't have, obviously they stopped Mason, but that Benson is the true point guard. I think number 2, Benson. He's just more of a just pass the ball to Brooks and Dorsey, and then don't forget about Bell. I think this game's going to come down to UNC's defense against that Oregon. Easy to say that, but UNC, the most steals in the tournament, 33 steals in 4 games. That's a lot of steals. They're giving up around 70 points a game, 18 blocks. But when we look at that Oregon offense, Dylan mentioned it with Dorsey. Dorsey averaged 13.5 points this season, and he's put up 20 or more points every game, especially against Kansas. Went 6 for 10.
Hashtag clutch.
Yeah, that's 6 for 10. That's 18 points right there. Math wizard right here. Yeah, it's gonna be tough for UNC to stop the Oregon offense. But as we've seen this Oregon team in the past, if they go cold on their shooting, UNC is too good, too well coached. That's another thing. I think well coached, because if you look at those UNC players, different than most years, maybe 2 of them might make it in the NBA, Jackson being kind of their scorer. But in past years, right, it's a lot different. Just Roy Williams does a good job. Some people say he's overrated, but I think he still gets guys to buy in. Dylan Brooks is going to get his points. And then at the end of the day, I like the free throw shooting of UNC as well. They're getting to the line 27 times, and Oregon is only getting to the line 18 and averaging 11 makes. So they're only shooting 65 from the free throw line.
They shoot a lot of threes.
They do. And that's the thing, NCAA tournament, right?
That's the thing. I mean, like, that's why I'm kind of skeptical about picking Oregon, because I'm sitting here and I don't like betting on teams in the NCAA tournament that rely so much on shooting, because it's only one game. It's not the 7-game series you have in the NBA where the better team's going to prevail. It's one game. Any team can win.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're good or bad. One game, anything can happen. And with a team that relies so heavily on shooting, like you said, they could have one bad game shooting from the 3-point line and they'd lose.
Yeah.
So that's why. But sometimes you just gotta go with your feeling. That's what I'm feeling, man.
And you know what? How much can Luke May keep on coming up big, right? Here's a guy that averaged like 8 to 10 points in the regular season, their 5th scorer, and now, he's getting 18 each game with some big shots, right? If he doesn't hit that shot, I can't believe his to recognize how much time was on the clock against Kentucky too. At the end of the day, though, I'm going to have to go UNC. I'll take the points. I think it's going to be really close, buzzer beater, but I'm taking UNC just because I don't like teams that live and die by the 3, and I like more well-coached, fundamental basketball, kind of what UNC kind of always plays. Get to the line, mid-range jumpers, hit the 3 if you can, but it's not a necessity. So I'm going to go with UNC, but for both these games, I like the points that the underdog team is at least going to cover, right? This game is 5 points, North Carolina favorite, which is way too big in my opinion. Same with South Carolina. So I'm taking North Carolina, but Oregon to cover.
So you can watch that kind of NBA game in the Warriors-Spurs. The Warriors rely on the 3. Spurs kind of more well-coached. So you can watch that really time, actually.
No, for sure, right? But at the NBA, if you live and die by the 3, these guys are good enough that their percentages are going to be better than these college guys.
Well,
right?
but even then, it's not one game.
Yeah, exactly.
It's 7 games.
Yeah.
So there you go. Just to look at the teams that each team has played. Oregon just beat Kansas by 14, very impressive. Michigan, Rhode Island. So they beat those teams. Kentucky, Butler, Arkansas for North Carolina. Those are some decent teams. I mean, it's pretty even right there for the teams that both teams have played. Some pretty recognized programs in terms of Kansas, Kentucky, Butler, Michigan. Some recognizable names for basketball. This game's going to be very good. Again, I'm siding with Oregon, and so is Dylan. Adam is going with North Carolina. Adam is also going with Gonzaga.
I'll bet them to cover to make money.
Yes, yeah. To make money, take the points, says Adam. Take the points. See, me personally, I'm not a NCAA basketball guy that bets on the games because they're just too wild and too I have no idea what's going to happen.
Oh God! And we're not going to be able to watch the game, so distressed about it. No.
Yeah. No thanks. I'd like to take something that's a little bit more sure thing, but let Adam. Adam, you have any advice for these bets before we go?
No, well, I'll take the points. I think Gonzaga, South Carolina, I'd take the under there, and I would stay away from North Carolina, Oregon, because I think the over and under is like 155, which that's like, 75, 78.
Mm-hmm.
I could see the game going like that, but obviously the opposite of that, I could see it both teams not shooting well and it being close, it being 65 to 70. But at the end of the day, I'm going to just take the points on both teams and stay away from the over and under. But there's always tons of other stuff you can bet on,
Yeah.
And then my lock is Undertaker at WrestleMania. Lock.
There you go.
Undertaker at WrestleMania this year. I don't know if that's a lock, bro.
Okay. Well, shoot.
Maybe
Now we'll talk after this.
That.
We'll talk after this. I got to get my bets in.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us on this March Madness Final Four preview and predictions video. It's Mitch, Dylan, Adam. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more AC previews and recaps, because myself, Dylan, we're going to be off in Orlando. We won't be able to cover that. We'll be covering you in the WWE area, but Adam will be here. He'll be doing some Final Four recaps. He'll be doing the final game, the national championship. He'll be discussing that, giving you a preview and also a recap on the day of. So thanks, guys, for joining us. If you were live, awesome. Thank you very much. Peace out.
Peace.